It is August 15th, 2018, and 7:04 PM, and I'm calling the Board of Health meeting to order. We have 2 variance hearings this evening and a few other items that are noted on our agenda. However, there are several items to be added to the agenda as not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance of the meeting, and we'll review them and then vote whether we want to add them to the agenda. So, first one is Fields at Sherborn, the acceptance of a deed restriction on number of bedrooms. And the other one is an emergency 10-day beaver muskrat permit for Ash Lane, Woodland Street culverts. And that's for the town of Sherborn, CM&D? Mm-hmm. Okay. I'll just note on the first one, we had this almost come before us before, where Trask had submitted some paperwork, but it wasn't ready for signing. Town council's reviewed it and is advising us to sign. My only question would be, I don't know if there's any kind of deadline for this, or whether it could wait. And is it important that we have it at a meeting that has more advance notice to anyone interested, even though town council is advising us to sign? So those are the 2 items. I don't know if there's any other discussion about whether we should or should not add both.
What was in the packet about, was that the original one or the one that we're discussing tonight?
They just gave it to us, right?
The one we were
So-
discussing tonight.
We didn't see it before.
Right, so the one that was in the packet said that, I know,
No,
I
that
know it's
wasn't the
not
same thing.
one. I know, but
No, it's not even the same thing. That's completely different.
This is about the bedroom count for the
Not
fields.
the public water supply.
Yeah, totally
Right.
different issue.
Okay. I was just gonna ask a question, but.
Okay. But this is, we're only talking about the, should we add this deed restriction
right.
or not regarding the bedroom?
The
count?
only thing, because it was a big discussion during the Fields at Sherborn, I don't know if they're in a hurry to get it, or there's some pressing need for it.
I would suggest that I would go along with what your suggestion is, based on the past discussions and complications of that project.
I guess my
It may
question,
not be relevant to the question I was going to ask, because it's a different issue, but I would always
Right, I mean, we
be in
can
favor of getting
have it
information
at
and
a,
being able to.
to me, the one sticky point is, we're being told by town council to sign it.
yeah,
There's
I would,
nothing-
I would love
So
that
to,
it's
we're
not a
able to sign it.
discussion, but
Yeah,
is
I-
it something people would want to just be more aware of?
Let's put it on the agenda, I think, and have a
And
discussion.
then discuss
And then
it,
we can,
yeah.
why don't we do that?
Yeah.
Okay? So.
Yeah, it should go on the agenda because
Yeah.
you're already discussing it.
Exactly.
Okay, on the next agenda. Is that-
Well, you're
Well, I think-
already having a bit of a discussion about it.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
having a discussion about whether it's appropriate to be on tonight's
but
agenda.
I think your point is, we should add this discussion to tonight's
Right.
agenda, whether or not we substantively
Oh, I
decide the
see.
Fields at
Right.
Sherborn today or at the
Exactly.
next meeting.
Because we
And-
started to
and I think,
discuss it.
Daryl, if I understand your
Right.
point, it's that
That's
there are
my
lots of interested parties who would say, this is the thing I'd love to know about ahead of time to participate in said discussion. So if town council said, no, it has to be signed by September 1st, we would talk about it today. But it sounds like there's nothing time-sensitive about what's been communicated to us, other than general guidance to do it. And it's not that we're not willing to do it or sign it, it's that we think that should be with appropriate public notice so that anybody who wants to be here can be here.
Right.
Yeah, and my point was that because there was material that was pending in the other, the thing that came to our packet, that would be a good reason to postpone it, because maybe that information would also be complete if it's relevant to discuss
What?
at the meeting when it's on the agenda with proper notice, is what I'm saying.
But I guess from a content standpoint, there's nothing really pending. Like, it's just us signing off on the language of the deed restriction.
No, I understand that.
And so it's not, so I think, like, my 2 cents is, if there's nothing pressing from town council otherwise, I would say, I always like to err on the side of posting community involvement for things that aren't emergent or urgent, which this doesn't appear to be.
Right, right. It was just such a big part of the discussion.
Yeah.
It's that it feels funny to not have.
To kind of have it squeak in as an add-on that was not anticipated.
But it's a very straightforward document, so we're either.
Right. So it seems like that should be able to be a 15-minute discussion at the next meeting.
hopefully. So, all right, so do we have a motion, though, to add both of these items to the agenda?
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, anyone? Abstain? Okay. All right, so I don't know if we need any more on that particular one right now, but I would say to add it to the next agenda.
To allow
If that's okay with
appropriate
everybody.
posting and public notification, given its non-urgent nature.
When is our next meeting? I just want to.
September 5th.
Okay, so I guess it would be helpful to have Mark here for the beaver permit. After you enter, would you like to do general chemical updates?
Yes, I'm ready anytime.
Oh, and while she's doing that, are you here for a particular item?
For the Wildwood Drive approval and various.
Oh, okay. All right, so
7:30.
we'll start that at 7:30.
All right.
Okay.
Am I
Take it
on?
away.
Okay. So, I reviewed the most recent document that was performed for the general chemical facility. And what this is a very focused report of the former above-ground storage tank area. So there was a tank farm, probably can't see this, but all these above-ground tanks that held petroleum, solvents, reclaimed chemicals. And there, in the past, there was one boring and 2 monitoring wells at one location for this really large area. And this area, this tank farm, is upgrading of the source area that they're proposing to clean up. So the question was, if there's a lot of stuff directly up gradient of the area they're going to clean up, should they also do the thermal treatment on the tank farm? How bad is it? Plus, we don't want to clean something up and then just have it get recontaminated, because that is not a good use of the little bit of money that we have. So they put in several borings and monitoring wells, and they found a decent amount of contamination, not a lot of petroleum, but a lot of the chlorinated solvents, which are the primary,
Which is
chemicals
what-
of concern at the site, which is what the thermal treatment's really about in this downgrading source area.
I'll also note, it's a concrete area, so you wouldn't expect oils to go through concrete, but they will go through,
Solvents.
solvents will go
Right.
through concrete
So
pretty
the
easily.
area where they did the boring was at the up gradient?
In the tank farm,
Tank
right.
farm,
Yeah. So
not
it
in the
was
down gradient source, okay.
Yeah, well, right. So there were many source areas at this facility. So there were the tanks, there were the places where things spilled, there was, just sloppy housekeeping, there were dry wells. So there was a myriad of potential places that releases went into the ground. But this was so obvious a place that they should have investigated. I don't know why this wasn't done 10 years ago. It should have been one of the first places they looked, but that's just the story of this whole, S show. Anyway, so they took soil and, I censored it. They took soil and groundwater samples, and the really interesting thing is they thought they were going to find the highest levels of contamination on the sort of southern end, which is the down gradient side, right near where they saw the bad source area. They didn't. They found it on the up gradient side, closest to the buildings. No, closest to the buildings. And it turns out, guess what was there? A loading dock. So now they're like, oh, we just found another data gap, which is maybe a lot of stuff just got spilled as it was being taken on and off the trucks for the reclamation and the spent solvents. So they then said, maybe we need to look there. So that report doesn't exist yet, but apparently at the beginning of August, they did go out there and they put in some borings and monitoring wells in the loading dock and building 2 area that DEP apparently oversaw, but there's no data posted yet. So, I think this just is kind of another example of this very piecemeal approach that's just been taken, that's just very unfortunate. You know, the Phase 2 report that was done years ago, which preceded the Phase 3 report, which figured out like what kind of remedial technology and where and et cetera, was very substandard relative to what the regulations tell you need to do. And I knew, because I actually looked at proposing on doing the work, I knew how much money it would have taken to do it correctly, and it was probably about 10 times what they spent. So this is the kind of thing that happens when you just minimize the investigation because you want to use as much money as you can for the cleanup, because we don't have a lot of money, and I don't disagree conceptually with that approach at all. The problem is, you don't want to clean something up that's going to get dirty again. So I'm glad that they're hitting the pause button for at least a short period of time to ascertain if they are actually doing the remediation in the right place, if they should and have the ability to expand the area that's going to get the thermal treatment, and or just really hit the pause button and take a time out to figure out, do we have the right plan right now based on what we're, subsequently finding or not. So I guess I'm cautiously encouraged that they are stopping to, I think, do the right things. It's just, this report is just like every other report in that it only talks just about this. So there's no figure that shows you, okay, well, here's what we found here, and by the way, here's what we found in the areas, down gradient and cross gradient, so you get the whole picture. No. All they talk about is the 5 or 6 borings that they did just for this report, and anecdotally sort of say, yeah, we need to take a look at this, but everything's on such a tight budget that they just, the graphics just aren't even there. Like, I had to hand write in my own information because they didn't even bother to present it in this report. So, it is a publicly accessible document, and Ellen, I don't know if we want to even post the link, so if people are interested in town, they can look at it. But as someone, who's, I think, a pretty seasoned professional in this area, it's going to be very difficult for people to put the pieces together.
Yeah.
Because it's just such a,
It's pretty
minutely
dense.
focused.
Yeah. So I have a question on that. There was a concern about the fluorinated hydrocarbons that used to be stored there that I think were anti-stain materials. Did this report give any update on those?
The PFAS?
Yeah.
No, there were some modestly elevated levels of PFAS that were found in a select groundwater wells. Basically, DEP just had them pick a few select wells. So right now, nobody knows the nature and extent of the PFAS. It did look like, based on, again, everything's very limited. It did look like it was going to be dissipating before it would migrate. I didn't see like a big plume or anything that looked like it was heading towards Sherborn, but it was a very limited data set. So it's not like they went back and said, we're going to sample, a whole ring of down gradient wells. And also, we have bedrock drinking water wells, and a lot of this assessment is shallower groundwater. It's like 30, it's not super shallow, but it's much shallower than our aquifer.
Do PFAS chemicals tend to be sinkers or floaters?
Based on what I've seen, a lot of times they tend to be shallower, which is good. Chlorinateds do tend to sink. They had concentrations in soil that was below the groundwater table. One location had over 1 million ppb, so like 1,200, I think, parts per billion. Don't write down these numbers, Ellen. But, very, very high concentration, which is indicative of DNAPL, and some of the groundwater concentrations, like you usually use about, if it's 10% of the solubility of TCA or TCE, that there's probably a DNAPL, pure product source somewhere. But they did look for it in the wells they installed, and they did not find it. And when I looked at the boring logs, which kind of just gives you a sense of the geology, the stratigraphy going down with depth, in general, it looked like the highest concentrations of the solvents that they saw were in the coarser, gravelly, and coarse sand units, which makes sense because they have the biggest void spaces, so you're going to have the most groundwater, which is what is contaminated. And then when you went deeper and you hit some of the like silts and the finer grain materials, in general, the concentrations were going down. So I think I didn't see anything in this report that makes me more alarmed about contamination impacting any wells in our town. But again, this is just a very focused snapshot of information. But I think they're making the right choices by doing some more exploration, and I guess we'll wait and see. I think the data should be available in the next couple weeks. So if I don't see anything on the site, I will ping DEP before our next meeting and just see if I can get an update.
Anything else about them being able to find more funds?
Not a thing. I've heard nothing. Yeah. So I don't, and the Superfund program's not looking very good right now anyway, so I don't know. I have not
No, I
heard
thought it would be more from
from
seeing
seeing,
sister
it's gonna be a
companies of-
legal,
Yeah.
hunt, and so I know they said they were going to pursue that avenue and see if they could get some money from one of the successor companies or spin-offs, but so far I've not heard anything.
Okay. Anybody have any other questions, or maybe we can do the beaver permit?
Yeah, here we go again. Buddies are in town.
This is right around the corner from me.
So, I came in, Sean Killeen came into our office Thursday, what was that, right before Ellen and I were heading out, but it was important. So Ellen called me, and I went out to the site before I came in the office. And there is damming going on again down at Ash and Woodland. I have the paperwork here somewhere, but I issued the permit conditional to you ratifying it, so I would ask the board to ratify the beaver, here it is right here, the beaver permit. The potential flooding of the road was next in line. It was starting to rise. I've been down there at least, it's my third or fourth time down there. I did have a discussion with Sean, asked him to maybe consider this, because I don't know if he's been privy to our conversations prior about a management plan, so that I won't be down there 3 to 4 times in 6 years, so that they have someone that comes out and checks these areas. There's 3 or 4 areas I can point out right away, and it's just unfortunate. One's down on Lake Street, the other one's down on Goulding, East Goulding, and then this one, and once in a while we get one down there, the Millis line down there, we get some damming going on.
Is this in that, so where Ash goes to, meets
Triangle?
Woodland?
Yes, right across the street.
Across
Where
the street.
Ash and Ash meet Ash.
Yeah.
It's actually
Meet
Woodland, but Ash has the water going towards it too, but this was more concerning on the Woodland side, looking this way, which would be north. So, but again, one area would affect the other. If that dams up, it'll go right over the road and into the Ash Street side, so.
Right.
So I'd ask that you ratify my approval, and it was inspected.
Okay. Any questions for Mark? We have a motion to.
If I can just stand corrected, he did say a lot of that flooding was also being caused, it was too wooded for me to get in there from and also a dam in the island area too, so that
That,
wouldn't be-
where the, it's
that
almost like an
wouldn't be-
oxbow.
The flooding I saw was on the other side building up, but he said there was a dam in there, and I'm sure there is. Well, was.
Okay. So do we have a motion to ratify the agent's approval of the emergency permit?
So moved?
Second.
Any other comments, discussion?
I'd just like to add, it was pouring rain out that day, so I couldn't get in that wooded area if I tried. I trust Sean is accurately describing it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
I'm going to abstain.
Let's see. For the Horsley Mounding presentation update, I don't have anything for today, but basically for next meeting, if folks have a chance to just jot down any points I just remembered him raising several points in the presentation when he came to our meeting that I'd like to see just documented in the report. So I have my few things I'd like to see and add.
Did you not talk to him about that?
I mentioned it to him, but I hadn't had any time
To
back
email
in
him?
June
Oh,
to,
okay.
because I was too busy with work to communicate that to him. And then I thought it would be better if anybody had things that just stuck in your mind that when you look at his report, you can see it in the report, and just be nice to have him write it down, since it came from him. So, let's see.
Is our funding for Scott Horsley's expertise limited to the Mounding argument, or are there other issues that we can consult with him on?
No more, the money was spent.
Yeah, at the last meeting, we mentioned that, well, one, it was dedicated to that, but we also returned a portion because we weren't ready to go to the second phase of his work until other things progress within the state from the Barnstable Septic Research Center. That's not the official name, but, and then see how Mass DEP,
Experimental
right,
station.
how Mass DEP responds to that, and so the town prefers that we don't just hold on to monies anticipating
No, but my
something.
question
No, but it
is
was dedicated
related to
to
another
Mounding.
issue that's on our agenda. Or should I just wait till we come to that?
Yeah, we would have to
But I
ask
think,
for.
but I think
My
the answer to
question
this
was-
question is there's no
My
fund.
question was, I just want to clarify my memory, which was that the monies were specifically
Yes.
limited to the Mounding
That-
discussion.
That recollection is
They
confirmed.
were not, right, so we would need other funds if we want to consult with him on other issues.
Yes.
So, how about the food inspection reports?
They look pretty
Yeah, in general,
straightforward.
nice. I mean, a few issues.
There's a little, some walk-ins sorts of
Right.
comments.
For example, I know that the Keurig machine issue at Sweet Meadow, she was doing research on that, because it's just sort of a peculiar one to show up at an establishment. Okay,
I was pleased.
yes.
Yeah, I didn't understand why the Keurig machine was a question.
Just with any cleaning requirements
No, I
might
understand,
be for
but
it.
we discussed with them at our meetings, how we want them to source drinking water, and as long as they are clear on what water is put into the Keurig, wouldn't that just be,
No, it was on
Ware washing.
means and cares for the Keurig machine.
It's not the actual coffee that she was concerned about. It's the cleaning of it between, like how often are you cleaning it and blah, blah,
She
blah.
mentioned a cup dispenser to me. We talked a little bit
yeah,
about it.
because when I read it, it was kind of vague.
It is vague,
And the Keurig
yeah.
machine doesn't have that much cleaning involved, because it goes right into the
Anything
cup
to
where
get
you drink it,
clogged,
but,
But the
yeah.
hot water to sanitize it by
I
itself.
mean, I don't know what she was
I mean, if
noting.
say a little cup got left in there for a long time,
Right.
it could get moldy, something like that. And so what we see are the notes, but she
Yeah.
does, you can also see on the bottom of these that someone at the facility has to sign it. So she goes over the report with them and makes it clear to them, even if
Right.
the notes we
Yeah,
shortened.
I thought she did a
So-
good job in those reports.
Let's see, do we have anything that would take away a minute?
You want me to clear up 54 Everett Street?
Is that
54.
a minute item?
Yeah, it was actually
Okay.
a lot of confusion, Ellen. I still don't know if I left you a sticky note and it got disappeared.
Yeah,
on
I
your-
never-
I had some trouble with my new email address, but I didn't want it on the agenda. It was more if the applicant, I wrote it right on his building application and advised him if he wanted to make an appointment to see the board. But just so the board knows, he's adding 800 square feet on a 1,400 square foot home. And I went through the chart with him on the phone, he wasn't here, and explained, one, we have no records on the septic system, so I don't know the design flow. And two, it's over 50%. And I did ask that he draw us with a ruler, because it was all squiggly, and I said, so the board can see before and after. And I said, you're welcome to call and ask to have a meeting with the board as your appointment. But I know he called, so I'll give him a call back. But it really, if anything, I can just give you that update, and then we'll see if he ever wants to present or bring an engineer in, or whatever the case may be.
And does he know that he can also meet with you
Yeah.
on the side too? Is that,
We talked a couple times, so.
oh, all right.
But, it's unfortunate, I think sometimes people have their hopes and dreams building applications. It's unfortunate that they don't end up here till they have their minds already set and not realizing it's more than what they thought they could do.
All right. So it's 7:30 and we have a variance hearing for a septic replacement at 3 Wildwood Drive.
And we're waiting on the engineer.
Okay.
Unless, Paul, you substituting for Dan?
I'll give it a shot.
When he walks in, tell him, hey, you owe me.
All right,
Dan's
so
not
maybe
here
we're
yet.
not going to start that variance hearing just yet until he's here. Okay.
Did you see the letter from DEP?
On the public water supply?
Yeah, I'm just
I think
trying
we
to
might do
see.
that one and then,
And then we can kind of interrupt it when the
Yeah.
engineer arrives.
so. All right, so this is a letter from Mass DEP to the fields at Sherborn for their public water supply, 2 bedrock wells, and the letter just describes some of the technical specifications of the wells, depth, where water was found, various issues with bedrock fractures, and quality findings. It was interesting that gross alpha particle activity was high.
And radon.
So what is, do you think, as a
Fields is the one at Western Avenue, right?
scientist in this area, is the explanation for the dramatically different nitrogen levels from what we calculated?
There's no septic discharging there yet.
Oh, just simply because ours were projections and these are actual current
Yep.
measurements, okay. I thought that might be, but I wanted to double check.
I mean, I guess just seeing the radon levels and the uranium in the water, that I'm wondering, what's it going to be in the air? So, I mean, the air is from a human health exposure standpoint, the radon in air is a much more concern. Like, if you look at the contribution from drinking the water versus the air, it's like 10 times more exposure from the air inhalation than from drinking water. Not that it's nothing from the water, but for
usually
houses that are
soluble.
served by radon, containing water, guess what? When you take a shower, when you have the hot
Right.
water, it's going into the air. So I guess I'm almost less concerned about the actual level, which is below the drinking water standard in the water itself versus, well, what's it gonna be inside the home? So, anyway, I mean,
It's at half, and there's,
Yeah.
I've seen, although
Or
it
more than
differs for
half,
every
yeah.
chemical, but that 1-to-10 ratio, that you can have 1/10 the level in the air, that has equivalent health effects.
yeah, it's not
Certain
exact,
things.
it's
Yeah,
not a
there's no
linear.
clear
yeah,
science,
yeah.
but it's
But
that,
anyway, it just gave me pause, which
minimal,
is,
yeah.
is kind of like, okay, well, we need to make sure that they look at the air when they're building these. Now, the good news
How do you
is,
quantify that?
you just take an air sample
Oh,
for
okay.
radon, it's really
Yeah.
easy.
Okay,
The
good.
good news is, it's very inexpensive to put in a radon system. So my personal would be, why don't they just put them in, all of them anyway? It's literally an extraction point with a vent pipe and a fan in it, and the fan literally
easier to
costs
do with this
under $100 a year for the electricity, and it's exceedingly effective. So part of me is wondering if prophylactically, it could be suggested
Yeah.
that why don't you just go ahead and put these radon systems in each of these
Sort of
homes?
integrated
Right,
into the
to
building.
vent.
of
Yeah,
just-
absolutely. You know how much
I think
cheaper
that's
and
a really
easier
good
it
idea.
is to do it at the time of construction
Instead of
than
later.
post facto?
Do you need a vapor barrier?
Yeah, so I mean, you could do it two ways. Like you could put a vapor barrier below, and like, so usually you put like permeable material like gravel, and like you dig like a trench, you put in a pipe, you perforate it, then you put in a vapor barrier, and then you connect the piping up. It can go inside the house or right on the outside exterior, depending on aesthetics. You could put it up through like a closet or a chase, make a little pipe chase. And it could be, I've put them in tons of homes for other reasons, for other problems.
TCE?
And, for TCE primarily. But you wouldn't even know that it's in there. It's
Yeah.
that discreet. So it's not like
Would
it's
that
this-
be under our jurisdiction to suggest that?
We don't have regulations on radon, and plus, these are public water supplies, so it would be the purview of the state. And they've already advised, the owner.
Well, they said.
No, I understand that,
Down
it's
the
not
road.
under our, we
No,
don't have a
but
law.
I'm talking about as part of the building
Right.
construction, which
Yeah,
DP
it
hasn't
makes
even
sense.
talked about yet.
Right.
Makes sense
But
to
why,
do
but
that.
would there,
We
my
could
question is,
suggest it,
would we
yeah.
as a Board of Health just say, we think, have you considered
Yeah.
X? It's not it's not a demand, it's just a suggestion.
It's a suggestion that would be very cost-effective for him, and then very protective and, alleviate, I think, concern on our part. Otherwise, I mean, he would need to do spot testing, I think, anyway, to get a certificate of occupancy. I mean, you have to show that the abode is going to be safe for people to live in, so.
How do we communicate that recommendation? Is
I
it
have
just
no
like a
idea.
letter from the board to?
Would it go through the ZBA?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who do we talk
Just
to?
advise them, to let them know. And then I think there are also two levels. One is whether it's coming up through the ground into the house, and the other is if it's just being brought in via the water, to make sure that every bathroom, shower has an exhaust fan. That kind of
They-
thing.
they gave a
It's
fair-
easily activated and all the rest, so.
In that paragraph that starts, if radionuclide levels rise, they gave an advisement already, so maybe the board can capture that paragraph and say the advisement's already been given, and the suggestion is almost like a cost savings.
Right.
It's trying to do it after the fact,
Yeah.
after you have poured concrete floors, good luck. But the other thing too, and I don't think it's gonna hurt, and hopefully the owner understands, I think it's a selling point.
Yeah.
You go in the house and you're assured one way or the other.
Right.
It's a selling point in my view, but that's not our jurisdiction, but I don't think it's detrimental to the sale.
The other question I had for you guys is, I just didn't have any context for the uranium levels. Like, does that mean anything, or is that just sort of incidental at these levels?
It's below the MCL, we can't, and it's a public water supply, so,
We sort of don't have anything.
yeah, I mean.
Okay.
But that's why I was wondering, we can say that we understand it's not our jurisdiction, but would you consider this, so in case it becomes an issue in the future?
It's all about mitigating the exposure, though,
Right,
so I feel
exactly,
comfortable
yeah.
that if we make suggestions that are very easy to implement and cost-effective but effective,
Right.
then that's sort of where I think we can come from it, but it's unfortunately just a suggestion.
Right.
Okay.
The other thing I wanted to let the ZBA know about is, so they need to have an emergency generator, standby generator. This is on page 6, third paragraph. So those, as part of their preventative maintenance, should be tested periodically. And just so they know, they might want to set some hours when that could be run, because it'll be noisy.
And then it looks like they then, the sort of Fields of Sherborn application sounds like it was still incomplete because of the sort of long-term funding mechanism or something like that.
That was when they're supposed to
Inadequate
set up
capacity.
these funds that everyone pays into so that when things break,
There's
they're
money
not
to
knocking
cover
on
that.
doors
Escrow.
begging for money, they just have it ready to go. So, as we saw during our hearings, they just really didn't understand some of the costs that can come up quick, even early on. So fortunately, usually when systems go in, they perform pretty well for the first few years when everything's brand new. But all it takes is a pump to have something be $10,000 expense. And so they need to ramp up maybe faster than they would otherwise think. And
So will we get something else from Mass DEP before their application is finalized, or is that the sort of thing that they would update and it would go to ZBA?
oh, no, this is a Mass DEP requirement.
Okay.
That the funds are there and ready to go because they don't consider it acceptable, especially for something supplying homes where you don't have the option of just sending everyone home from a business, where it needs to run all the time. People can't be without water, so.
I'm glad they have public water though versus private
Yeah.
wells. That was
Oh, yeah.
a
This is a
decision.
big improvement.
Yeah.
So,
Just so the board knows, Dan McIntyre indicated he will not be here tonight, he's on vacation.
Oh.
Said he sent a letter, but I don't remember seeing
Yeah,
a
but-
letter.
I didn't see a letter.
So Paul, do you want to hit substitute?
I guess,
He mentioned it to me a month ago, but then I never heard from him, but he said he sent a letter, so.
all right, so
unfortunately-
can you
Over the plan.
Oh,
describe
you know what,
the
it's in
system
his
to
letter.
us?
Yeah,
It's
the
in his
variance.
letter, here it is. Unfortunately, I will be on vacation
Oh,
and cannot attend. He actually, and Ellen,
Oh, I
thank
didn't-
you.
we didn't-
Ellen, you highlighted it for me.
We didn't get that though, right? We just got
The
the,
variance
This is him
letter.
calling, if you want, I can take the call or not.
want to put them on speaker?
Do you want?
Well, I
do you
don't
want
think
me
we
to
can
take
have
the
them,
call first?
I don't think we can have them participate remotely because of
Yeah.
open meeting.
Regular
Yeah.
phone right now, but we're deciding if we're going to put you on speaker or not.
I don't think we
No.
can because of
Okay.
open
Board
meeting.
feels we can't, so you did definitely highlight in your letter of request for variances, so with that, what would you like me to advise the board? He would like me to advise you to approve the variances. Getting a lot of chuckles out here, Dan. It's up to the board. I'll let the chair decide how she wants to handle it. Okay?
all right, so we'll have you explain things to us.
He's hoping his explanation between each waiver will be sufficient.
Okay, is he around if we want to take a recess and have you call him
If we take a recess
back?
and I call you back? Okay, he said yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you,
All
Dan.
right, then let's, if you want to bring over
Yeah, I guess it's.
the plans. All right,
Almost
so we are
substitute.
having our variance hearing, and,
All the green cards were, everything came back, so it's all set.
great.
And
If
that's
you
what
would
you-
like to come up, we're going to put the plans up here. Mark is going to explain what's needed, because he's reviewed all of it in detail. But ordinarily, it's the
Engineer usually
applicant who
presents.
makes the
The
presentation.
abutter or the owner?
Yep. This isn't a butter.
No,
Oh, it's
Realtor.
the buyer.
the realtor for the buyer.
It's just a little.
Okay.
So this is through Wildwood. Situation here is more grading than anything else. You'll see there's a hill that goes down quite steeply. And so he's stepping the trenches. These are the trenches here. They're being stepped at one point and then leveled off at the bottom with some final grading and an impermeable barrier. And also, the good thing with it going downhill, it's not a pump system, so there's less mechanics. But with the site constraints, especially the hill and the amount of room he had between the well, 125, to this point, he could have moved, but there's the old tank. In my view, he found the right spot to do the soil testing. Here, and he's going with the slope on the trenches as required by state code. This is a different plan than what I reviewed. It was updated for conservation requirements because of the slope. There requiring some additional work to be done, and Dan wrote that into his plan. So that was the revision right here with conservation requirements. This is the plot lot right here. There's a driveway right here that goes to two lots in the back. It's right at the corner of Harrington Ridge, the first house on the corner there, and it does cut down quite a bit. And he's asking for waivers based on the site constraints. And he does give a definition in each, an explanation in each waiver request, so
Okay.
if the board wants, we can
And
go through them.
we're comfortable with, I don't see any other arcs for wells here,
Nope, it's
so,
just this one here.
okay. And
And
so,
the wetlands
I mean, I
really
see that he
constrained.
says nothing else within
Yep.
200 feet.
And he has the wetland issues too.
Okay.
So he's lot line, wetlands, treed area up in here. I think for what was out there, it's better than what's there right now. This pit, these two pits, it's pits.
Oh,
that are
geez.
there.
Yeah.
And was the Concom okay with the
Yeah, this-
the
this-
setback being 84
Yeah.
instead of
Yeah,
125?
They reviewed
Okay.
it. I don't know if he put the date of review, but they did require additional erosion controls. But they saw the plan and they approved. I have their order conditioned over those.
Okay.
I would
so-
let the board look at it, and if you want, I can put on another plan, the one I...
All right, so how about I'll, ask for a motion for each one, and then we could ask a few more things on each topic. So do we have a motion to grant variance to 7.0D?
So moved?
Second.
And so for further discussion, the trench spacing less than 6 feet, any comments on that?
Based on the site constraints and the hill, I think it's reasonable that he's requesting that.
Okay,
If he couldn't do the 6 feet, it would be preferred, but then you're running into the septic tank location, so
great. And
the site constraints.
the sidewalk, and,
The sidewalk, and you'd be closer to the property line,
Right.
it's 14 feet already, so, that needs to be waived as well.
okay, and so it's a good thing, I presume, that they are true trenches, so we've got the sidewall that's compensating a bit. Okay. Right, any other questions or comments on that? So all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstained? Okay. Do we have a motion to grant us a variance to section 8.03?
So moved?
Second?
So the 27 inches rather than
So you have a
24?
trench at 27 on the last two level trenches versus 24, it's a 3-inch difference. Our codes, the state allows 3 feet, but our code says that you have to have no more than 24 inches of cover. He's trying to slope it off a little even. And the trench distance, perpendicular distances are 27 versus 24.
Okay, and is that, I'm guessing it's not over the entire,
No, it's that.
right, it'd just
Just
be
the
on the
deep point.
uphill?
Yeah, it's true. The third
Okay.
trench to the last two trenches, so first two 11, third trench is 27, and it's fine after that. So it's-
And
there is a-
even once you get up to the stepped
step.
area, the
It's
the
not as
downhill
much.
edge will be less than 27, and maybe it's just at the back.
Yeah, it's correct. At the upper portion of the plan, there is a profile, you can see it almost where the two level trenches, then it goes up and it starts to level out, so that's two.
Okay, so it comes close for at least some
Yeah, 3 inches.
reasonable portion of it.
I think it was an engineering issue, and again, I don't see an issue with that. It's a repair, it's better than what it was going to be.
And two
What it is.
pits?
And then the point of that is just to allow for some air exchange, because that helps with breakdown. So,
They're collapsing, actually, he wrote on the plan too, for the pits.
Oh.
Pits are collapsing, so.
okay. Any other comments, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or otherwise? Okay.
Or
And
close to collapsing. I stand corrected, he's saying collapsing, as, I thought he wrote collapsing. Collapsing when they're putting in the system, so there won't be a danger, but I stand corrected.
And then, do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 10.2?
So moved. Second?
And this is the setback distance to the property line in the front only, right?
So that's really where the road is, correct? Yeah, so it's
Right
not,
at the base.
Actually, there are two, and then setback distance
To
to
the wetland.
the wetlands, but if Concom's happy on that.
right, I
Yeah.
totally defer to them on that.
Okay, any other comments or questions on that one? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that's the only, okay, that's it. All right, I'll close the hearing, and are the plans ready for approval?
Conditional to the garbage grinder prohibition, and Dan, as well as other engineers, when sitting in the audience, is starting to use trenches again, where we hadn't seen trenches for a while. And Dan's only change here can be done in pre-construction. I've done it for other engineers too, the 4 inches of the larger stone above the pipe, which is not shown here, so I'll make sure that it's corrected during pre-construction. It can be done in pre-construction.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve the plans subject to the conditions that Mark just noted?
So moved?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
I should call him and tell him he's got to get here.
Have a good night.
Want me to call him and say, how's your vacation going?
No, she just told me she was.
Paul's here for 35 Eliot Street.
Perfect, right on time.
So, do we have all the green cards?
Yes.
Are you Eric tonight, Paul, or?
I am, he's home with his 2-year-old sick. Besides, Mark is gonna take over.
No, don't get up here.
Wait a minute. Did you give explanations
We're
and
ready.
waivers?
7:50.
He did such a good job, last one.
You know, geez.
Okay, so we have a variance hearing for a septic system replacement on Eliot Street.
Good evening, everyone.
Aye.
This is 35 Eliot Street. It's not a very large lot, maybe an acre. The rate is less than 2 minutes per inch, so the well radius is 150 feet minimum, although in this case the well is uphill, but we can strike the article if this sliver of land here to do the septic. As a result, we've elected to do infiltrating, which gives us 40% reduction in size and reduce the variance is needed, which in this case offsets the property lines. We also cannot make the 150-foot offset to the on-site well, but we are worried to get 125 feet.
And you said that's upgrading.
Right. So typically, with a less than 2 permit, should be 175 with the Sherborn.
175
Excuse
or
me,
150?
150, should
Yeah,
be 150,
I thought,
right,
that's what I
yeah,
thought.
Yeah,
So 25 feet closer, but it's hydrogeologically upgraded, so.
yeah, quite a bit higher. It's elevation 96 versus elevation 86.
Except if it's in bedrock, it's moot.
Right, it kind of doesn't matter. So, and can you show us where, I know the second ones were for the property, from
people's
abutters, yeah.
This property is really
You got-
sort of off by itself.
You got it, believe it or not, go on the top of your profile where the building pipe is, right on the top, you have it there. You're good for that, I look for them.
This one here.
This one here is
Then-
down
yeah, it's
here.
right here.
Way down here.
Oh, and so
It's-
how far
it's
is that?
in the profile, but, it's 175 feet to that, to the,
Right,
so
so
what
we
Paul
meet that
showed.
requirement.
The
From there
abutter.
To this, so that's the buffer line from this well.
Right.
Radius is right here.
Oh, you just made it.
Just explain that to David, it's.
Well, it's another reason to make-
Space in here.
It's another reason why we went with infiltrators. And again, it's
More
sort of
compact,
over this way, it creeps us over to this property line. We maintain that.
It's pretty smooth.
Yeah.
It was in this well. though.
Yeah, that's what it sort of looks like.
Yeah.
And he still has to ask for, a few waivers, because the soil.
And the
is
other
expected to
abutter,
filter.
the other one is also fine?
Yeah, well, he
Well,
explained that there's no other wells within 200 feet.
Okay.
except the shop.
Is this a new construction?
That's just-
Or a failed system? Is this, Can't tell.
This is a
Oh, septic
replacement.
replacement, so it's a
Yeah.
field system, okay.
So we meet all the requirements of Title V, but we do have these two, should have been three really, if you consider each property line a setback variance. But under section 10.1 BC, to allow the
Can I-
each year to be 125 feet versus 150.
Okay, I think that should be A and C, because if it's an uphill well, that would be 10.1A. If it was a downhill well, it would be 10.1B, and the C is the additional 25 feet.
So that's.
So it should
B,
be-
it should be A.
It should be A and C.
It's because it's an uphill well.
Because the well is uphill.
Yeah.
Okay, so do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 10.1A and C?
So moved.
Second.
Wait, no,
No,
go
I was just
ahead.
explaining the
No,
soil type.
that's good,
was
I'm
a
glad, yeah.
coarse gravelly sand. I was just saying, it could have been a gravel yard, it might have been a gravel yard at one time, but that obviously hampers the, doesn't hamper, but it requires an increased distance to the well, as Ellen just explained. And the reason for that is, the concept is the effluent, the liquid portion, gets through the soil quicker.
Permeability.
Permeability, correct.
Less to stick to also. So, okay, so, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed or otherwise? Okay,
Thank you. And
might
then
have everybody raise hands.
Second-
There's so
second
many
one,
people, I
section-
can't keep
No.
track of who's
Section
saying that.
10.2, again, we're requesting a variance from property line of lot 4 to 16.5 versus a requirement of 20. And then on lot 3A from 17.6 from the required 20. And again, I think we've done the best we can to keep the septic system minimum as we can, meeting the requirements, and the well is probably the most important. And again, just a reminder, Title V is 10 feet versus 20. So, I think
Do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 10.2?
So moved.
I'll second. Just one thing I'll note, I mean, it's nice it meets Title V, but here we have issues just with people, you know, it's like the domino effect. Something moves closer to their property, there's less, it's harder for them to fit things in, so, which is a big difference from towns that don't have both well and septic on site. So, but in any case, any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So I'll close the hearing, and are the plans ready for approval?
Plans are ready for approval, conditional to a deed recording for the garbage permit.
Okay, and that's the only one? How about that? Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the plans with condition noted?
So moved.
Seconded?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
You did a great job.
Thank you, Mark.
Well, do you tomorrow, Paul? Did I see? Well, I see you tomorrow. Well, I
Yeah.
see you.
Yeah.
You should have a good day. It should be all sand like this site.
Is it really?
Oh, that's right,
It's
yeah.
Next to the fields.
Yeah,
Should
I
be
dug
all
there
sand.
before. We're
Okay,
coming down
why
in the
don't we
low
do
area.
the,
I dug there like
water
10 years
sup-
ago.
oh, we did.
We ran out of sand, so we'll see. All right, good night, thank you.
Do we have any other comments on the water supply at the fields?
No, but so what's our, if we were gonna make the suggestion, can you just articulate again, how do we broach this?
How do we operationalize the communication?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and-
I think we
and
could just
who-
let ZBA know, and is that something that you got enough from our discussion, or should we sit down and write something together? Not this week, early next week?
I
possibly?
have to let them know they need to have an emergency generator that should be tested periodically, or you do.
It's a requirement
is
that they
No,
have
my-
the generator, but just to know that it produces a lot of noise for about
Yeah.
20 minutes, depending on what they're, and it should be, it's often monthly. There's not a specific requirement,
Okay.
but if they're doing the right thing, they should run it at least monthly to make sure it'll function come time.
I think
So,
We were talking about the My Radon
Just,
system
and then
idea,
the
Oh,
other
and
is the
then the-
radon.
Okay.
just recommending that.
Or just general ventilation of, maybe first a determination of whether there's also radon coming up through the ground or not. Is it just in the water? And that would lead to potentially wanting to put in a ventilation system for
Like, I think
airspace.
there's like a link that you guys have made in your head that commuting to kind of environmental scientists would be helpful, which is, given that there's radon in the water,
Yeah.
you guys are worried there's radon in the air, and would
There will
encourage
be.
there will be radon in the air, and would encourage the applicant, when constructing new construction, to incorporate mitigation strategies as being markedly less expensive than remediation strategies post-construction. And so I think it's to kind of push that
Make it a
scientific knowledge to
seamless
ZBA to say,
integration.
you can do this really cheap and easy now, and if you do it afterwards, it'll be really expensive. Or not really expensive.
Not really expensive,
More
more
expensive than it
expensive.
would have been had you been proactive. And you guys sort of looking at it would say, this is something I would worry about and would encourage the applicant to consider.
And then is there a mechanism that we can ask ZBA to ensure that a representative number of air samples are collected prior to issuing a certificate of occupancy? Or is that beyond our jurisdiction?
Which one was it for the?
So does the building inspector ever look at
Indoor air.
radon tests now, do you think?
That I don't know.
It's often like a.
I mean, usually a
lenders who-
buyer will do
Right.
it because the mortgage
Right.
company will require that you do
Yeah.
it.
Right.
So someone's gonna, I think someone will do it, but it would be,
I think
kind
it
of-
might be a nice proactive thing that we could do to help the zoning board know kind of issues to think about. To
So that would be,
prevent,
so
to
it sounds like
mitigate.
that would be the other
potential.
piece we'd recommend to ZBA, is to encourage testing strategies for built
Prior
units
to
as part of the
occupancy.
sort of occupancy
Yeah,
pathway.
pre-approval
And for us,
process.
it's not that we care when in that process it happens, but
No.
we would suggest having it be uniform rather than ad hoc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it would just be a nice measure to ensure that anyone who's gonna be living there
It's a
is not gonna be
safe living
exposed to
environment.
elevated levels. Just in case, for some reason, if a lender didn't require that
Right.
testing.
If somebody said, I'm a cash buyer and I'm just,
Yeah, exactly. Which can happen.
Okay.
Okay.
No, it happens with Title V, too.
Mm.
We never find out until the next buyer.
Okay.
I like our pace.
you're gonna jinx us.
All right, so how about the tough one, the ledge disruption?
I think our newest member has something to say.
Our newest member does have something to say.
Oh, really?
Yes, oh, really? So I've been doing quite a bit of research on this, and I have a short report. I've been able to read, I would say in detail, all the documents that have been forwarded to me by various members of the board. And I did a lot of research online, and for better or worse, I didn't find much more out there than what you guys already sent me. I have an appointment to go up to Concord next week and meet with DEP, or whatever they call themselves up there, to talk about their program.
DES.
Right, DES. Their program that they have in place, and I've got a call in to the professor at UConn, but I haven't heard back from him yet. And that's kind of where it stands. I formed some opinions. If you want to hear them, I'm happy to say.
Absolutely.
So it seems like the starting point right now are these draft regulations, or very preliminary ledge disruption regs that Lisa wrote, right? And they seem very consistent to me with what New Hampshire's doing. And given that I didn't find anybody else, any other state that had anything, that's really our only guideline. it's confusing when you have the manganese issue at Maple Street kind of commingled with the ledge issue, which is a broader thing. And it seems to me it might be appropriate to separate the two, or to think of the manganese issue as one contaminant among a list of contaminants that these regulations would be aimed at detecting in the event that a ledge disruption causes a contamination. I think this draft needs some work in the mitigation area. It's a start, but we need more there. I don't know what, but it needs more. I could imagine a contractor that was faced with mitigating would be aggressive in seeking detail and wanting to know how much is he exposed to and so on. What else? There are two ways of removing the ledge. One way is blasting and the other way is hammering, right? And clearly from my research, blasting has an additional problem because you may introduce the residue from the blasting agent, which is typically ammonium nitrate fuel mixture, ANFO as it's called, right? And it's got lights of nitrate, and New Hampshire has well documented that it's a big problem up there. Millions of pounds of ANFO are used every year across the state in construction, like 5 to 10 million pounds. And so I'm hoping to learn more when I go up there to talk to the person up there. I don't know what his position is. I need some more guidance, though. I saw from the minutes of the last meeting that there was a discussion, and one of the issues was more scientific evidence. So the question I have for the board is, okay, scientific evidence in which part of this multifaceted problem are we looking for?
So I think from what I've seen over the years, and even with the whole perchlorate issue in the state, I think there is that understanding that the blasting agents get into the water and travel. So that one seems on firmer ground. Also an issue that the DOD researches. So the manganese issue is the one in terms of really pinpointing it. Seems a little harder. I've found just scant references to that.
There isn't much out there.
And something
yeah.
in Africa, I think it was, that there was a study
But
done.
is the question, does ledge disruption lead to an increase, or potentially lead to an increase in manganese in adjacent wells?
And if so, at what levels, and does it, I mean, that's why I was trying to focus on, well, what's the delta? So is it a change? So if you had de minimis levels of manganese in your water before the ledge disruption started, and then they blasted or they hammered the ledge, and then you were now, 10 times higher, then the question is, okay, well, is it at a level of concern? Does it need, mitigation? Do you need to stop the approach you're taking because it's having an impact on the abutters? Is any impact tolerable? So those are the nitty gritties. Actually, conceptually, I think it's not that hard. It's like a few basic pieces to it, but the nitty gritty is really hard because we have to start making decisions on, well, how much change is too much change? And what are you going to do about it? And once, if a problem happens and it's not detected till post facto, then what are you going to do about it? How are you going to make that a butter whole? And so I think
I totally agree with that. I think your point, David, was a really good one, which is, I think having manganese is one of multiple contaminants. Like, I wouldn't anchor to just say what happens with manganese, but I think if there are other contaminants of interest.
There definitely are.
Yeah,
and I think
Lisa's draft lists nitrate, lead, arsenic, barium, cadmium, chromium, copper, manganese, iron, and total dissolved solids, which sounds to me like a reasonably good starting point.
Right.
Maybe you could add nitrites in addition to nitrates, for example.
But it sounds like, so I think that the manganese piece is part of it, but I
Yeah.
think it's a more general principle of,
Absolutely.
in general, how do we think about changes in those, and how do we do that? And I think there's some places where we say we may not have scientific data where somebody did a study to say, we've lost a budget, did this much. And I think
Right.
it's okay for us to still regulate in that space, but to say that right now there's a lack of data and our job is to try to ensure safety and transparency to the degree possible, but that we can't say this is an absolute. And then I think ultimately that would be the guidance of town council to say, this is the basis on which we're,
Right, I think going in eyes open, knowing that if you do it in a haphazard way with no controls, there can be very serious consequences to abutters. So we don't want that to happen. So just big picture, we want to say, you come in with a plan. What's your plan? Is there going to be a level that it's, if someone's breaking up, like we were talking about, 5 yards of ledge, I'm probably not going to worry about it. But so we need to think as a board, there's probably got to be a level
A
that,
threshold.
that,
Yeah,
that,
that this is
like, is it
large.
200 cubic yards? Is it 1,000?
Right.
Which is what some of the states,
Right.
or for blasting, that's when you
New
need a plan.
Hampshire's lower bound is 5,000 yards, which
That's
is a
too
lot
big
of
for us.
material, right?
I would say that
yeah.
the incidents in town had a whole lot less than
Yeah,
that.
that's a lot of material.
Comment. So, like, when you were talking about, not talking about this one case, but at the time, I did some research on it, and I did call Scott Horsley. I did have a conversation with him over the phone. And according to him, so I'm not, this isn't my personal opinion, because the ledge is composed of different minerals in different places in the country and different places within one geographic area, it would be difficult to predict what could be present. Although it is true that in this part of the country, there's a high incidence of copper, lead, and manganese in our ledge. That's just, if you just say that out, okay. So, because we know that most of these minerals have toxicities associated with them, they're well described in the medical literature and scientific literature. We don't have examples for example, of 50 people suddenly became, had Parkinson's-like syndrome after X occurred, but we don't need to, because we have individual cases where we know that that particular element or mineral can lead to toxicity if elevated. So if we have a baseline test of the water and it shows X and then we show something else, I'm not sure we need to.
Well,
There's
I
a-
would say individual cases, to me, would not be an argument, but there are toxicological studies that we could point to. I mean,
Yes, of
manganism
course.
is well understood and
Yeah.
some of the others. So
Yeah,
I don't
and
think we could do
copper.
anecdotal, but toxicological studies
I
we could
I
point to.
actually
whatever
think
the-
that's that to me, actually, Rebecca, that's the more straightforward piece, which is that there are levels above which we're not comfortable, but like
Well,
you
we
were
know.
saying, we have two pieces here. We have, should we set specific limits for some of these inorganics that are different or more stringent than secondary MCLs, which aren't even enforceable standards for public water supplies, by the way. So should we set some limits for some of these? That's one part. And B, should we have a set of regulations that proactively makes developers contemplate if they are going to be disrupting ledge in any manner above which, some quantity of ledge, if it's going to be disrupted, that they have to submit a plan to us that talks about, here's how we're going to do it, here's our contingencies,
Yeah.
maybe we're going to set up
Right.
booms or a sentinel well, here, that require maybe some baseline monitoring just to get a snapshot before they start
Yeah.
disrupting ledge of how do people's water look, and then, monitor it or just take a samples from each of those
Yeah.
locations again when they're done and make sure that things are within, some reasonable percentage of baseline, and if they're not,
Yeah.
what to do about it. But just making that a process. Right now, there isn't.
No, I
even
agree.
that.
So I actually, I'm really sorry I'm not concise at all, because I didn't even make my point. I was just saying that because we know all that already, I don't think we need to waste time with it, because there are drinking water thresholds already established on science. And I think if we have a baseline.
We're all in agreement.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, I'm not even sure I think I would look to you to see what percentage of change from the initial you know, whatever, the MCL, that was the debate you guys were having once at another meeting, but I would ask you guys, the earth scientists, what that delta should be, that's the threshold, but I think we just,
I mean, I guess the first one
I
is,
just
do we
require
have,
baseline
we don't have
study and then a
thresholds
follow-up
right
study.
now, and so we also don't have delta for the,
And I think delta is a hard thing to say.
Yeah.
Because really, it's if you hit a certain level.
because if you said I tripled it, but you're just at the
You're still at
detectable limit, but you're one tenth of
negligible
the-
or
yeah.
so
Well,
far
if it's
below
not-
any
well, that's what I'm
health-based
saying. If it's
threshold.
below, I don't think it matters if
Well,
it's below.
so do we care
the
about, so I
threshold.
guess my question is, do we care about anything other than a threshold?
Well, so
I don't
A,
think
we
we do.
have to decide, what do we think is an appropriate threshold for several of these constituents, which do not have necessarily, like I said, an off-the-shelf drinking water standard that's promulgated by the state. So we can say, well, some of them have secondary MCLs, so we can say, well, we're gonna just adopt secondary MCLs as a standard. We could say, we're gonna adopt 50% of the secondary MCL to
Can you help me
build-
understand? I'm totally not savvy in the MCL. So what's the difference between
Okay.
a primary MCL and a secondary?
Okay, a primary MCL is an enforceable federal drinking water standard. Or in Massachusetts, they're called Massachusetts MCLs, or maximum contaminant levels. And so those are enforceable standards for public water supplies. And they are typically based on health protection. They do factor in a cost benefit, and also things like, is it even feasible to get it, you know, cleaner than 1 part per billion and things like that. So it takes into account health, you know, feasibility of implementation,
So health plus
detection limits,
pragmatism.
a whole bunch of that kind of stuff. Okay. And then secondary MCLs are for things that have generally lower toxicity, because compared to something like TCE or some of these other substances, you know, things like nickel and copper for people, they're also required parts of our diet. So in general, the toxicity, I'm not saying it has no toxicity, but it's a lot different
It's a different
than some
bucket.
of these kind of solvents and, you know,
Okay.
petroleum hydrocarbons. So they're based on things like often health and aesthetics, like taste, like a metallic taste,
Yeah.
or you know, or salt,
Staining
color,
laundry,
yeah,
clogging
right.
pipes.
So they incorporate typically those types of things as well, because the toxicity is so high that a lot of times those aesthetic problems arise before you even hit
Okay.
the toxicity level. So that's the difference. But the secondary MCLs, because they're not necessarily based strictly on like dose response studies that are health-based, like the primary MCLs, they are not typically enforceable. They're recommended, but they're not enforceable.
But in
under
the
federal
absence
law.
of a primary MCL,
You
we
could
could say our
adopt them.
best available data is a secondary MCL, so we
We
will
could-
use that threshold
We could
because
certainly do that.
I like water
I
that
would
tastes
use the
good.
existing standards.
So
I don't think
in
But they're not
our-
standards. That's
Right.
what I'm trying to say. I'm
The-
being very particular about my
It's more,
language.
it's more a guideline than
Yeah,
a
yeah.
requirement.
Kind of.
So
okay.
in our regulations, we have a section where we define some of those limits, sodium and all the rest. We could add to that, although in some ways I'd rather see us
Stay
defer
broad.
to something else, like the state drinking level for whatever the
Right.
current standard is. So we're not always updating that
Yeah.
section,
Yeah.
but we could add things and say, and then secondary for
Make it a
these
living
items,
document.
Right.
So that it's continually
Is a
updating.
living document, meaning it's changing with
If the state
Right,
changes
so
it, they
because we
would
don't
link
want to
to
say
that.
the number 40, like,
Right.
you know, mgs per
Exactly.
liter, because
And then we have to
that's-
update the
right.
regs every
So I
year.
think it's fine for us to cross-reference. I mean, I think actually Massachusetts does a
Does
good
that,
job
yep.
about really taking a look at the standards on a more regular basis than the feds, because it's such a myriad of hoops you have to jump through, and let's not even talk about EPA right now. So that I think it would be better for us to reference and rely on the state, and also that puts us in
There are a few things,
very-
though, that the state doesn't cover that EPA does, such as the target levels for things. There's the, as Lisa mentioned, there are the standards that incorporate the technical and financial aspects, and then there are target levels of ideally what would be a level that they think people would not get sick from, and those can be a lot lower, or zero, as we've discussed.
It's
in the
zero for
past.
every carcinogen though, so that's
So-
not, it's not an enforceable standard, because, you know, you don't have a detection limit that can detect necessarily, you know, like
Right.
it's just getting to the point of
But the idea
infeasibility.
is that there's a bigger range out there.
So it sounds
for-
like,
for possibilities.
philosophically, it sounds like our feeling would be for things that have a primary MCL, reference that in a, please see state regulation X. For things that lack a primary MCL and only have a secondary MCL, use that. And there may be a subset of things.
I would use, frankly, I would use ORS guidelines, so the state has.
What's ORS?
Okay, so the state has a division called Office of Research and Standards,
Okay.
and that has a bunch of toxicologists. And so what they do is, as these emerging contaminants, PFAS,
Yep.
perchlorate, 1,4-dioxane, like, oh, we didn't even know what that was 10 years ago. We didn't have any way to detect it. They're the ones who do all the research, like they look at worldwide studies, you know, they check out what other states are doing, what other countries are doing, and they come up with something called, typically the first step is called an Office of Research and Standards guideline. So it's not necessarily an enforceable standard, but it's always a health-based number. So I would say for constituents that lack state drinking water standards or secondary MCLs, that we would use the ORS guideline if available as, you know, a relevant standard for those
So it
constituents.
sounds like our charter would then be
Like a hierarchy.
to kind of think about,
Yeah.
in general, what are the things we need to look at? We would have the drinking water standards for those that have it. We'd have
Yep.
the ORS standards for those that don't. We
Right.
sort of need to define the list of things that we're worried about, and then figure out which of those meet one of those standards, and are there any that are unregulated that we think is important for us to regulate? It sounds like that is unlikely, given the exhaustive nature.
And also putting us in a position of, one
Just sort
of
of
us
saying
is a
we're-
toxicologist,
Right,
and I
yeah.
would be very concerned about
I-
us setting.
And so would we
I
say
would-
that if something doesn't have one of those standards, then our feeling is we should take that off our list? Like if we say ledge can do this, but we say zirconium, whatever, you know, whatever the chemical is that's in there, that we say we came across this, but that's not being regulated by anybody right now. Like, I think it's just important to set
Well,
parameters.
what's wrong with making it a completely living document like we were just discussing a minute ago?
Yeah.
So that way,
Yeah.
see, the second you start putting a list, we could just say, you know, then it's like, oh, well, that wasn't on the
So
list
it would
when you
just be the
published the
reference.
regs.
Okay.
Is literally
Right.
just say that at
Right.
the time of
Yeah.
either
The app-
sampling or
Yeah.
application or
Yeah.
well installation, it could cover us for well installation as well.
Right.
That way, we don't have to be worried
Right.
about
Yeah, that
updating our
sounds-
regulations
that sounds
all the
appealing
time.
to
Right.
me.
And
So,
I also think that it's, oh, sorry.
What I'm gathering from this part of the discussion is that there's a lot of knowledge on the board about the MCLs, the contaminants, and where to reference that. The part we don't seem to know very much about, and I'm learning, is how to craft regulations around what the contractor, or the engineer, whatever it is, has to submit if they're going to disrupt the ledge, what tests they have to do, what wells they have to drill, what tests they have to pay for in the abutters, and then what has to happen if there's a contamination, because we've got to start, but, for example, it slops over into best management practices for disrupting a ledge, which New Hampshire does have. It's written out. It's not as comprehensive as I might like to see, but it's a good starting point. What do you do with the overburden, right? For example, Rebecca brought it to my attention in one of the projects, they took the overburden, buried it on the site, and then covered it with topsoil. I don't know that that's a best management practice or something that we want to approve, so.
Right, I mean, like, so, you know, when you're doing an investigation at a site, like, so when you drill borings or you're doing excavation, a lot of times you might put down poly sheeting and then have
Capture that,
piles,
yeah.
and then you might sample it and make sure, okay, so if this is all good soil, you can just put it back anywhere on the site. If some of it's a little too contaminated, maybe you send it to an asphalt batching plant, or you talk to Sean Colleen about, like, could we put this under a road? Because it's really not
Mm-hmm.
contaminated, but it's just a little too high to put back on the
Right.
property. So, I mean, it can get, though, really expensive and really complicated. We're not talking about, we don't think that people have, quote, hazardous waste
No.
here. We're just talking about that we don't want to
There's
put
something-
something in contact with people's water
Right.
that's going to cause
We'd love to
ultimately
reduce the risk of
problems.
problems.
Right. For
Yeah.
It's not that this is
example,
something
in New
bad, this is
Hampshire,
Right.
wrong.
But
part of
when
the
I-
regulations under blasting has to do with the management of the muck pile, right?
Right, exactly.
And
Disposing of it.
because
Yeah.
there's
And-
half-spent explosive, there's whatever was in the
Right.
rock, and maybe other things as well. And those are the things that we have to look at. So my suggestion is that I go ahead and work on that, all right, and not worry so much about the chemical or contaminant side of it, which we know more about.
Yeah, and I would actually comment on, you said you wanted science, but I'm not sure we need science, because in speaking with, I mean, I don't know what you're looking for, because according to Scott Horsley, it's very well known that
Well,
when you
no, I don't
crush
thi- I don't
rock,
think- I
those
don't think
things just
anybody
get
dis-
dissolved. Yeah, no, I
But
know.
nobody, I think that, I don't think anybody disagrees with any part of that. I think it's come up a couple of times. I think everybody says, we think ledge disruption matters. Like, that's the whole premise of this discussion, is I think everybody says we think it's important, we think it's a gap. It sounds like we have the things we think we need to regulate and the pathway for how to regulate them. I think the point you're making, David, is really, what are the remediation strategies and next steps? And then I think adding to that, I guess my other question, which I just don't know for the zones, is like, this feels like it's Board of Health to me. What I don't know is there any footprint for a Conservation Commission? Like I don't know if there's another group that we'd want to bring into the vetting process as we have a draft regulation related to any part of
I
this.
think it'd be reasonable, they already have things like what you can and cannot pile within a buffer zone and that sort of thing, so that would be covered, but it'd be worth checking.
So
But-
sort of after we have a draft regulation, then getting Concom opinion on it would be
Oh, and I
appropriate.
think planning board, and
Okay.
I think we should vet it with others. One thing, I mean, so I'm going to go back to where I was in the past, and I think to get to the kind of regulation we're talking about now is going to take some time. I'm concerned about the short term, so I am going to push again for the idea of maybe we do it in steps. I had the short thing that basically said if someone's about to do ledge
This
disruption,
or
that they notify the abutters, so that, and with enough time, so the abutters have the opportunity to do testing themselves, to at least get that in place as the baseline and what happened before, which, then ideally would be something I'd like to see us do as quickly as possible. Come to some agreement about that, and then build upon that. Okay? They've been notified, oops, and now you give us a plan, and it needs to include these elements. And here are the best management practices we want you to take, and now we're going to ask you to do the monitoring before. So,
But
add
don't-
those things in when we have a firmer footing,
So
because
the-
those are going to be really contentious,
I mean, the Board
too,
of Health
when we
has
get to
the
that.
authority
So-
to establish a bylaw. We don't need to, we can establish a bylaw if we think it's important.
Yes.
So
I think
why
that's
would
what
you
you
saying
say
I'm saying
that
Process.
Let's get
that we
something on
should
the books
require the
quickly.
testing
Yes.
prior to construction? If ledge disruption is planned, so there are baseline values, why can't we just have a bylaw that requires baseline testing if it's anticipated that rock
We
ledge
could
disruption will
say you
take
should
place?
provide notice and offer testing for the following constituents. Here's our other problem, though, is right now, in terms of our regs, so we have a list of, I think I came up with a pretty reasonable list of stuff
Yeah.
to analyze the water for. They don't need to look for certain things at all, like, it's not gonna be benzene or,
No.
chlorinated solvents or anything.
Right.
It's just these select inorganic.
almost all
Right.
inorganics.
Yeah, okay?
That have
Fine.
described.
Do we have in our regulations a level that people are gonna say, okay, well, like we were saying, so we'll have a baseline, and then maybe at the end, they'll go back and they'll just take a confirmatory sample. What are they gonna compare it to? Do we even have anything in our regulations that talks about the inorganics that they're gonna be analyzing for.
We have to have some
Well,
standard.
we need it.
of some
I think
kind.
we
That's what
should-
I'm saying, like,
You're right,
I don't
you're right.
understand how we can do one without the
I think we
other.
just need a bylaw that requires baseline testing in case the question ever comes up in the future. And
Yeah,
that-
but then when are they gonna be held accountable?
When a well, well, I guess that's.
Yeah, we
happens with
need that, we
wells.
need, we need a
You need
number, a
threshold,
benchmark.
An
Yeah.
MCL or whatever, you know.
Yeah, something. So what does it say right now?
1711.3, it was already built into these, Section 217.
I didn't bring mine.
Well, this.
No, I didn't bring mine right.
And manganese, you have your color, you have your
This-
turbidity.
Yeah.
Okay.
So color's 15, turbidity's 0.5, manganese is 0.05, and iron's 0.3.
Here's the check.
So we've already,
We already have those standards for a new well being drilled.
for new wells, so we would have to,
So
always wanna make
which
that
section,
clear.
which
It's only
section is
a
it, Mark?
17.
It's on page 22.
Oh, thank you, I was just looking up.
Yeah, I
There's
couldn't
another one
find
here.
it.
It's turbidity, iron, manganese,
Doesn't have any
color.
pages.
Color, turbidity, yep, nitrate, nitrogen,
Oh, yes, those
No,
fluoride, sodium.
Why don't we
There's no 21,
just
because it
require
ends at
baseline
11.
testing?
he's
That's not unreasonable, is it?
a different book. He's looking at the more
With
current.
new
Yeah, I
construction?
You're looking
went
at
through
the
that
older one.
today, and I couldn't find it, yeah.
I gave you
Sorry,
one.
you have, people have different books.
yeah, it's
Oh,
on 22
all right.
in your version.
Okay,
And I
You're
forgot
looking,
mine.
you're looking at the
Really?
older book. He's looking at the more current.
this is really section 12, okay.
Yeah, it's 17.
17.3 is what I have.
What, 17.3?
So, let's see. I guess I think but maybe I'm just making it too complicated. I think the requiring the property owner who's going to be doing the blasting to have a monitoring program and then follow up, just seems like a bigger hurdle, but maybe it's not.
I mean,
And
we
have
just.
them pay for it, is that the idea?
Well, I thought that would be fair, because you're undertaking an activity that has potential, demonstrated potential for causation.
Oh, yeah, I agree that it's
of
fair.
impact.
So I guess if we could craft something that included that. It's a
And
start.
they should
and
offer, they offer the testing for the following analytes. A homeowner can decline. That's, that's, if the homeowner declines, that's their prerogative. I mean, we can't.
But I think we should require
No, but I'm saying even if.
baseline testing.
Yeah, but we
Because
can't,
we
but
can't
it's the
see.
homeowner as well. So what I'm saying is, I agree that we should say, provide notice and offer baseline, analysis for the following constituents to the homeowner, and we can make sure that they offered it, or require that they offer it, but a homeowner can decline access. That's their right.
Right.
So we can't force a homeowner
No, I'm saying with
to-
new construction.
Oh,
No, but
it
should be
your point is the
required.
abutter.
I'm talking about the abutters.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, correct.
New
Yeah.
construction
Yeah.
has to have baseline,
Right.
everybody has to have.
Before
baseline.
there's occupancy,
Yeah.
right.
I guess then the other, okay, so I could see,
Like maybe,
giving it a shot to
Right, you
require
offer it
that
to
and
the
see if
abutter.
town
Right.
council
I see, yeah, got it,
Yeah.
okay.
We may
can
run
tell
into
us
the-
how to do that.
But it-
59 North Main, we had something a little different. It was the drawdown issue.
Right.
Some agreed to have their wells checked during the drawdown period, and others said no. They just didn't want to have it.
The other thing I see as being something that we'd need to figure out then if we're not just going to go straight to notification, but, or rather, not just going to do only notification, but do the testing that they would pay for,
Yep.
is how we decide who of the abutters are the
Right.
ones who get tested, how far out that is, and then after that, a notification to others, because we don't know what the flow dynamics are,
Right.
right, off of any property. So what we've seen so far is close in.
Right.
But we also don't know over time.
But if the close isn't affected,
Right.
then the far isn't. So I mean, I think it's
Less likely,
reasonable
but not
to start.
impossible.
Start
Right,
with
different
So would that be like
fractures.
a well within 200 feet Like, I-
Or make an arc of what,
Yeah.
a bigger arc.
Like,
than that.
whatever the arc is,
Yeah.
like, I think some
Within
define arc of
500 feet,
500
right,
feet or
right.
250, whatever number.
A butters
seems to make-
within that
Right.
distance would be.
Because you can sort of imagine a lot of different lots.
But we could
Butters
require
and people within a
notice for a
distance.
larger, so we could say,
Yeah.
notice and offer sampling and baseline sampling and analysis for the following constituents to wells within 500 feet of proposed ledge disruption, and then provide
And the
notice
rest of butters.
only to
Direct abutters.
any abutters within 1,000 feet. Yeah.
And the testing would be carried out by the property owner or their agent that's doing the ledge disruption, and they would pay for it, and they would select the lab that does it,
That's what, I mean, I'm okay with that. That's.
and we trust them to.
Well,
But I think it would have to be an accredited lab, right? Like,
yeah,
there's an
but I mean,
accreditation.
Mass isn't like some states where they're like New Jersey that have a much more rigorous, but yeah, we could just say
Much
Mass.
more what?
Rigorous, like they make the.
And-
lab
Right, all the
do
people, right, everything always
sampling
comes
and-
from learning
Presumably,
things the hard way.
it's a developer, not a homeowner, right, most of the time. I'm saying, would they run into the same
Well, we're about to
problem?
have maybe a homeowner who's
Okay.
going to be doing it.
Would they run into the same problem with getting tests done because labs don't want to do this anymore? Or would they have more
Oh, no, no.
leverage?
Oh,
to-
no, there's, I mean,
There are labs that would
there's
do
labs
it?
that do drinking water
Okay.
testing
Yeah, but-
all the
yeah,
time.
Drinking water, but they're fewer and fewer are doing homeowner
Okay.
testing anymore.
Yeah.
That's,
So,
But we, like, for example, at a lot of my
like if
sites,
it was
we
me
have to
being
do-
tested, I'd want to do a split sample. There is no way I would trust
What's a split?
wanna have
someone doing it.
two
Or,
labs?
or offer
Collect the
to
sample
reimburse
and
them.
the person about to do ledge disruption gets to send it to their lab, and
Oh,
then you
okay.
get to send it
Oh,
to
I
the
see.
lab
Yeah,
you
yeah,
want,
yeah.
just to confirm.
That's a really good
But
idea.
you do that on your dime.
Yes,
The split would be
Yeah,
on your
that's a
dime.
really good idea.
so,
I guess I'm not as paranoid as Earl.
No, but it's, I mean, you look at the states that have the biggest problems, they're also the states with the most rigorous procedures, and so it's, you think, oh, okay, so they obviously learned the
What
hard
do you
way.
mean?
New Jersey's what you're saying, they have a more really rigorous.
Well, no, they're just
Yeah.
kind of crazy about labs and certification. It's all money-making schemes in New Jersey, so
yeah.
trust me, it has nothing to do with
But they
actual
also have all,
accuracy.
but they also have all those plans.
well, they have a big chemical
Well, they have the
industry.
highest,
Yeah.
probably density of chemical
Right,
releases of
exactly,
any
right,
state in
yeah,
the
yeah.
country, so.
Well, that's what
I
I was
have a
thinking,
client
that
with
there probably
stuff
were some
bubbling out of the
lawsuits
ground
we don't know about.
on
What?
that property.
Ooh, that's nice.
Say that again?
All
I
right.
In New
have a
Jersey?
client with stuff bubbling out
Okay.
of the ground in New Jersey.
So,
So,
Right, that's what I was saying.
I know
bet
what
you
my
that-
homework is, I think, now,
So
so.
it sounds like we've got good next steps.
I think that would be a great first step,
And when do we want to?
because this is gonna take a little time.
yes, that's,
And
my
I think-
concern is, right,
So do you think that
It's
it's reasonable
complicated.
to try to have regulation? And then if you want to go farther and have a bylaw that take months and getting input from various boards and things?
I don't see bylaw and a regulation as different. One is just a simple regulation, and then more detail and more complexity to the regulation.
Right, no, I
It's like
understand that.
taking
I'm just saying that,
17.3 and just, right now, we're talking about maybe changing the way this is done.
Right.
To peg it against other
A living reference
ongoing,
standard.
evolving standards, so that we don't
Like
have
the whole
to
D,
go in and
instead of
track that.
saying concentrations and
Right.
listing them, we can just say for, all the constituents that we're talking
Right.
about, that we're gonna link them to the.
And that's sort of just an update.
Massachusetts.
Yeah.
what did you
Well,
say?
except, yes, it will be an update, but I mean, didn't we have that VOCs have to be non-detect, which?
Right.
It's-
And that's for more discussion another time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd like to get back to that one, and what we're going to do about that for practicality sense, my perspective. But anyway, all right, so David's got an enormous pile of stuff to research, and then there's the, how we're amending maybe what to test for and what are the standards that would be applied to the tests that come out. That's another piece. And then there's some middle ground between what you had written, what I had written, and could we craft that? I don't know if you and I want to work on that again. David's working on the other, and is anyone interested in the lab test standards piece?
So where do we talk about things like, okay, where's our standard for lead and arsenic? Like, where,
They're not there.
Use the state.
but it does, where does it say that?
Why don't we list the state regs for reference somewhere?
Oh, here it is, C, right, the last, or no, that's just
No,
saying
it
that-
doesn't say, it just
Yeah.
says it's required. Where is it reference?
VOC is a reference in G, 17.3G.
It says, so that's VOCs, but what about lead and arsenic and?
It's a good thing we're updating.
There's not, they're not,
It could be in here. It's just, we require it.
Is there
Yeah.
a
Just
index
take
at the
it away
back?
and take it back up.
so could we put in the bylaw,
I
if we
mean-
were gonna, the thing we're gonna put on the books now, Daryl, the notice and potentially
So-
baseline sampling, could we just say, you know, analyze, should be analyzed for this list of stuff and that, shall meet, and then we could reference the state regs in this new bylaw?
Right, so under A, it does say water which, it talks about, you know, testing, water which does not meet the accepted standards of
Well, that's,
agencies of the state or
it's-
federal government for potable water supplies shall be grounds for the rejection of the
Yeah,
well.
so that's just-
That's a catch,
it's
that's
very
the catch-all.
general. Okay.
But we may want to, as you
be a
said-
little clearer.
Right,
I
and,
C, 17.3C, it talks about all the other tests, pH,
Yeah.
color, iron.
Yeah, you know, I'm not, it's,
It
the
just
analysis
uses
isn't the
standards.
part I'm
but we
talking
might make it easier to follow the
Yeah.
flow
Yeah.
and get it updated, and
Right,
then,
I think
I
so.
agree.
what are the categories, what are you looking?
Yeah. And then provide reference.
And when do you choose, I mean, obviously, the state's always going to be more stringent than federal, but then there's the additional guidance that EPA may have. EPA has those, you know, ideal targets, that kind of thing, when.
Well, they have-
reference
they
that
put-
and when not, so.
They put, for things that are emerging contaminants that they don't have standards for yet, for example, PFAS, EPA publishes health advisories. I've never seen a situation where the state didn't have an ORS guideline that was at least as protective as a health advisory, so I think the hierarchy still works by relying on the state. And also, like I said, it just, EPA is low in general. I mean, it takes a long time to get the standards.
He's not too lightning fast on some things either.
No,
so
but, I mean, they have
Rather
the
have a tortoise
proposed.
or a glacier? Or pick it between a tortoise and a glacier?
Yeah.
You'd say, I guess I'll go tortoise.
There's fewer hoops, though, for the state than there
Yeah.
is for the federal, so, and fewer, like, large lobbying groups.
Well, there you go, 1,4-dioxane. There's a good example. Alaska, 77 parts per billion. Massachusetts.
Yeah, perchlorate, we're among,
Three parts per
perchlorate, we're
billion?
amongst the strictest as well.
And if you look at that analysis, it was just mentioned today at a meeting I was at, and you look at the analysis, and Alaska depends.
Oh, yeah, right.
So, you know, so the EPA's
People's
price.
livelihoods
Yeah,
and,
so
yeah.
the states are doing their thing, and the EPA's trying to find a happy middle ground, I think, on some of these issues.
Some of them, yep.
It's difficult when you're dealing with variable states.
So,
She's interested now that.
And so when,
Yeah.
so in terms of follow-up timing, do we think this is a September or an October? Like what kind of timing feels realistic to people to kind of think about having this on the agenda again, just to
Yeah,
kind
I-
of,
Personally, I wouldn't have any time between now and the first September meeting, possibly the second.
I think the goal is like what feels
What were
realistic to
you-
people without saying, oh my gosh, this is an independent stressor. And so I think, like, it feels like we're defining a pretty large body of work. And so I'd love to keep moving forward, but also like, you know, are we thinking September 19th versus like, what would it be, October 3rd?
Yes.
Do we want to shoot for the October meeting just so that we kind of feel like we've got this covered timing wise?
I don't think that it makes a difference. I think we're going to put it off no matter what. I think we should, I personally would think we should talk about it.
I just feel
as
like
soon
I'm
as
giving
possible.
David an ungodly amount of work, and I want to, just in terms of like, there's a broad scope and a lot of things that we're thinking about.
But we're not
when's
going
Oh,
our-
I see David's stuff is going on for months.
Okay.
True,
Yeah,
but I don't
yeah.
know. I mean,
My
that's a lot
stuff-
of it,
Stuff
so.
to look into.
Are
What
we
is it
talking
that-
about getting the short bylaw
Okay.
on the
The
books?
short
Yes.
bylaws
Bylaw on the books, I
is,
think,
that's
yeah.
much less than the scope of what I'm
Yeah.
trying to
So
So we
then
have
do-
a meeting the 5th, and we have a meeting Yom
5th and the
Kippur?
19th.
That's Yom Kippur, by the way.
Which is Yom Kippur.
The 19th.
We should move it then?
Do we have anything scheduled on the 19th yet?
Already, there's one variance hearing, so there'll more than likely be more.
Yeah, we should.
There's 3 variance hearings for the next meeting.
I don't think there's school that day either. Right?
I don't know.
I can't
Well, don't
remember.
you think that-
It like no longer applies to Daryl.
It's
If
high holy
somebody
days, so.
Doesn't apply
would
to
be
you anymore.
reasonable about that?
Oh, right.
I don't, would be, are you talking to me?
Well, I think
Yeah,
they'd
I'm
say I've
saying,
got a variance.
Wouldn't people be reasonable about it if we had to change the meeting?
Yeah, but the notices go
They've
out.
already
Yeah.
gone
Yeah.
out.
Have they already gone out?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep, it's been scheduled.
You're going to allow public discussion over.
Sorry.
when you decide to present something.
Well, that's what I was
Like
asking for this
regulation
short
review.
bylaw.
Oh, eventually we'll have a hearing, yeah.
But for a
It's
short
still in
bylaw,
formulation.
do we have to get, what's the process? So
yeah.
we have to provide public notice?
Yeah,
and
it's
give
got to
them
be
a
in the
review period?
newspaper twice,
Okay.
with the second notice at least 2 weeks prior. So you're talking
30-day
time,
posting out.
yeah.
So that's a long time. So if we're not even going to have a proposal to present till October, then we have to give people notice
Right.
and review time.
Yeah.
I think we
Hear
So you've got
comments.
to,
I think
but
we
you've
should-
got to
So
have
do you
it,
have
next
any
meeting.
time to try to,
Yeah, I can.
Work on language?
I
got
can
to
work on.
draft it and be very
I'm
specific.
happy to work with you, or
Yeah.
whoever we're
I'm gonna-
talking about.
Yeah.
You and me, all three of us, whatever.
I'd
Can't
love
be all
to-
three of you.
can- No.
Oh,
but
that's
the
a
thing is that if you
violation
have-
of the-
For example, if
the
you
open
have
meeting rule.
some
Could be a
ideas
whole
of things that you want,
Oh, and
No, you
then
can tell
that's
me.
how you
I
get
think what we
around.
were talking about is notice and offer to sample and analysis, which David
Right.
already has what
Yeah.
I think we should analyze for.
yeah.
Perfect.
Within, you guys come up with the radius
Yeah.
of
Right,
the
now we'll
butters,
have to
and
do
then I
research
think
on
a
that, yeah.
larger radius, maybe double that smaller radius, to provide notice
Yeah.
prior to disruption.
And so the goal then is for the first September meeting to have that draft language for review to start the clock on the notice and et cetera and whatnot that'll take us
Well,
into October.
well, no,
Well,
then
no,
we'd
you
have to
have
hammer
to
out
have
the, I mean, we'd all have to
Specific
go over the-
language
Draft
and the,
language.
So what's our goal for
Numbers.
September 5th?
That's nosies.
I think that, just knowing how things work, that would be a busy meeting. If the summer's over, September 5th's already three hearings, so. Usually people are starting to rock and roll by October.
and then you're getting into budget.
Well,
It's
so
gonna
I'm
get
just trying to
very-
figure out the timeline, because I know, Rebecca, you've kind of communicated some concerns about things getting put off, but I just want to be realistic about, we do better when we commit to, we'll do this on this date, and if we sort of are saying abstractly, we'll work on this, I'm worried that's tricky, but I also want to set realistic goals, so it's not asking a volunteer board to do heroics. And so I think it's kind of for you and David for what's a timeline that feels comfortable, and then I think the question for sort of Ellen and Daryl is, what agenda seems like this would give it the necessary time for appropriate consideration without staying here till midnight?
So how about?
Right, but I also
We could
think-
always put it on for the 5th, and if it has to slide, it slides.
Okay.
Also, you know,
Why don't
we
we
can
try
do,
that?
we can do
Things
progress
come up,
report.
but
We might not be
again,
done.
David, you're not, this is not your timeline, I mean, because,
I'm not an
That's a
expert
hard-
in
really
writing,
hard
well, it's
stuff.
not that, it's just, I'm not an expert on writing regulations, having never done it, right? So there'd be a learning curve there.
So we'll sort of have an update or discussion of the
we'll have something.
narrow
whatever
scope
we can
regulation
get
for
to.
September 5th.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then it sounds like our other ones are the Field of Sherborn deed restriction and the Mounding study update are sort of other agenda items plus the 3 hearings.
And the mounting
And then
study
the
stuff
other
could
one.
just be, so one example
of
is, he
question.
talked about the relative speeds with which water travels through soil and then bedrock fractures. So that was just something I think would be good to be in this report, just to capture it, so we have it. Because that was a big deal, right? You have how things are moving through the soils, but as soon as they hit
And so,
bedrock, and if there's a crack there, it's going to be moving.
and so our goal for the mounding is really to
Much
kind of
faster.
have people share any questions or outstanding issues that we'd sort of like as part of the final resolution from Scott.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Were things, I'm just thinking there were things in his verbal presentation
That were not in the report.
captured in the report that I think are important. I just want to make sure to communicate those to him, so.
Sounds good.
Okay, so, any other ideas for the next agenda? Or
I think we should
have-
borrow that Craig machine. It sounds busy.
Okay, so now we just have minutes and payroll, and Rick, I'd say if you want to, I mean, all we're doing is paperwork now and signing a plan, so you can sign us off. Yeah. Thank you.